Hey, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about Feast 3, The Happy Finish. I recently did a review of the previous movie in the Feast franchise, and I was not a fan. There were quite a few things in that movie that really took down my enjoyment level, and surprisingly, this movie I actually found like mildly enjoyable. I wouldn't say that I loved it, but it was definitely a decent time. I definitely had a decent time with it. I had a lot better time with this movie than I did with the previous movie, and this a lot of problems that I had with the second Feast film uh, were not present in this movie. So I had problems with some of the CGI. There was like an excessive amount of CGI, and it was bad CGI. They toned down the CGI in this movie big time. Another little problem I had with the last one was it felt kind of isolated. They were just in a room, in the same room for a lot of it, and it could have been, bigger scale. They had the whole town. This one, they're kind of jumping around from place to place a little bit more, so I like that. That made it, a little bit more entertaining, kind of kept me on my toes. So, yeah, this definitely improved on, you know, quite a few things from the last movie. So yeah, I thought this was a decent movie. I had a decent time with it. So before I get too deep into the review, I'm gonna give you all a little plot summary. Surprisingly enough, most of the cast members, most of the characters from the previous movie return. The movie starts right where the last one left off, and it's funny because some of the characters that you would think would be dead, they're still alive for most of this movie. Like the one gentleman who got the pipe through his face, he's in the majority of this movie still alive, and it's funny, he can just like barely talk, and they have subtitles for his character, so that was fun. I think the one of the luchador guys, what I think he was alive for like a second in this movie, and then he died. But yeah, pretty much all the cast from the last one returns, and once again they're trying to survive. There's like a couple new characters that come in, and they're seen as like as saviors. So at the beginning of the movie, everyone is they actually make it to the jail cell. They're holding it down at the jail cell, fighting off the creatures, and there's this hero who comes through. They think he's gonna save everything. Something happens. It doesn't work out. Then there's this other prophet who can just like ward off the creatures. He can just tell them like step back, and they just they just they just get the heck out of the way. So they follow that gentleman through the sewers, and most of the like pretty much the rest of the movie takes place in the sewers, and they're just fighting off the creatures. They run into this gentleman who he's like a wannabe action hero, and that fool has some bad luck. And it's funny, the bartender character, like so much terrible stuff happens to this guy. Like he gets both of his arms chopped off, and then the bartender character, he's just like, yeah, just just walk it off. You gotta keep fighting, man. Just oh, you don't have arms, just use your leg and start kicking them. So yeah, for the most part, for the rest of the movie, they're just all the characters are just navigating the sewers under the city, fighting off the creatures. So that is the basic plot summary. So getting into the actual review here, I pretty much just have all positives because, even though this movie didn't totally blow me away, I thought it was decent. It was, mildly enjoyable. It was a decent time. So it improved upon so many things. I have to give it props. I couldn't think of like any outright negatives. I mean, it wasn't the best movie ever, but I couldn't think of anything that it there wasn't anything like egregious about it. There wasn't anything that this movie like totally did wrong. It just wasn't like the best movie ever. But anyways, one of the first positives that I have here, and something that I liked about the movie, is that there was so much comedy in this, and the movie did not take itself seriously at all. This movie, it was just meant to be a fun ride. It's not some highbrow piece of art. It's a direct to DVD creature feature, and it's the third installment in the series. I think it's great that they just had fun with it and they didn't take it too seriously, because it worked well in my opinion. The action and the horror elements were still taken seriously, but there was so much comedy, and so much more comedy than the last movie, and I feel like it just, for this type of movie, it worked really well. And a lot of it was kind of like sleazy comedy, silly comedy, kind of like bottom of the barrel stuff. But for this type of horror movie, I feel like it works perfectly. Like, it's kind of like raunchy humor, gross out humor. Yeah, like just, some, very inappropriate humor. I don't know. The humor in this worked for me. Like I said, the one guy, he's got like a pole in his head the whole time, and then he thinks one of the luchador guys is like his baby, and there's some graphic, gross out deaths where like they might turn some people off, but they're just so like WTF. I'm like, is this really happening? And it's like the first act of the movie, like some people get like piped away on, and then that's how they meet their demise. So like I said earlier, the guy with the where he gets his arms cut off, and then the bartender's just like, walk it off, and then he's like trying to like cauterize his wound, and then the guy's like, oh, did you learn that when you were in the army? Like, is that how you learned that? He's like, nope, Rambo 3, and then just blows off his arm. So that was funny. And then it was funny how there was all these like false prophets, and then they're like built up to be like the total savior, and they're gonna help us break free, and everything's gonna be all right, and they just like all fail miserably. So that was fun. There's like a lot of dark humor in it like that as well. So yeah, I really like the comedy. I believe I mentioned this briefly earlier, but there was a ton more action in this. It wasn't as much about, it wasn't as much of an internal conflict this time. It was more just like, okay, we're being attacked by these creatures like every 5 minutes. How are we going to survive? How are we going to kill the creatures? What's the plan of attack? There was so much more action. I feel like in the last movie there weren't that many of the creatures actually on screen that much. In this, there were so many of the creatures on screen. They looked good. They were all practical, and then there were new enemy types. So in addition to the normal creatures from the franchise, there were these humans that were kind of mutated. They were almost like zombie-like because they had interacted with the mutants. Like if like a mutant like puked on them or whatever, they would get all deformed, and they had like their own abilities, and they were like kind of more like vulnerable than a normal human. So I like the new enemy types. I like that we got to see the creatures on screen because they look good, and it's a creature feature. I want to see the creatures, and this movie was very bloody, very gory, mostly practical effects, barely any CGI. And that's another thing that I wrote down, and I'm just gonna kind of add that to this point. You know, I'm already kind of talking about the effects. Like, they totally improved on that aspect, where the last movie there was so much CGI, it was terrible. All the practical effects in the last one were great, all the CGI was terrible. This movie, there was like no noticeable CGI. There was like one instance where there was some CGI fire, but what are you gonna do? I mean, are they gonna get like a whole pyrotechnic unit? Is it gonna there'll be a lot of messing around. You don't want anyone to, you know, catch on fire. It's a whole deal. A little CGI fire, I don't care. But everything else, all the other effects in this movie, they were all practical. The kills were creative. They were funny. They were gruesome. There was some like body horror with the kills. There was just blood splattering during all the kill sequences and all the action sequences. So I don't know. This movie just, it like delivered on all the stuff that, you know, I felt was missing in the last one. So yeah, I'm happy that I checked it out. I'm, you know, happy that, you know, I was able to enjoy myself, because, you know, that's why I was like interested in checking these out. I'm like, oh, I've never heard of the Feast franchise before. Oh, there are these, you know, creature feature monster movies, and, you know, they got some gore, they got some kills. How have I not known about these? Let me check them out. So I'm glad I checked them out. This was the last review for the franchise unless they reboot this. So who knows? Nowadays anything is up for a reboot, you know. Even some obscure properties. Who the heck knows what's going to get rebooted next? I don't know. So I don't know. I might have more content coming at you with this franchise. But anyways, before I head out, I'm going to get into my recommendation. So I would recommend this. I think this is a decent movie. You know, it's not going to blow you away. It's not a top tier creature feature. It is a low budget direct to DVD third installment in a franchise. So, you know, it's not the highest quality movie, but is it a fun time? Yes, it's a fun time. I think it hits all the marks of an enjoyable horror comedy. It hits all the marks of an enjoyable creature feature. So I would recommend this. If you're a fan of the first Feast movie, I would say the third one is worth checking out. So yeah, that's my little recommendation. And other than that, I've said everything else that I wanted to say. So I'm gonna head out here. Thank you all very much for watching, and peace out.